Cover such a horrifying case. While shopping, Andrew Miller discovered a piece of meat on the.
No one inside that crowded shopping mall had any idea that within minutes, this ordinary place would turn into the center of one of the most horrifying crime discoveries the city had ever seen. It was a busy afternoon in a large Brazilian city. The mall was packed. Shoppers moved between clothing stores, food courts, grocery shops, and restaurants. Inside the supermarket section, customers lined up at the meat counter waiting for their turn. Among them was a middle-aged woman who regularly bought meat from this store. She stepped closer to the glass display, scanning the trays carefully. At first, everything seemed normal. Neatly arranged cuts of beef, fresh chicken portions, large slabs of meat resting on ice. But then something caught her eye. Something that did not belong there. She leaned closer. Her breathing slowed. Her heart began to pound. In the far corner of the display case, lying among the other meat cuts, was something unmistakable. A human leg, not a piece, not a fragment. A complete human leg from foot to knee. The toes, the heel, the shape of the ankle, the natural curve of the calf. Everything was clearly visible. This was not animal meat. This was human. The moment of realization. For a few seconds, she stood frozen. Her brain refused to accept what her eyes were seeing. She blinked, looked again, then leaned even closer. The reality did not change. The leg remained there, silent and horrifying. Her hands began to shake. A cold wave ran through her body. She wanted to scream, but no sound came out. The thought that someone could be selling human body parts inside a public shopping mall was beyond comprehension. Slowly, carefully, she stepped backward. She turned away from the counter, forcing herself to remain calm. Without alerting the shop staff, she walked quickly toward the exit of the store, her heart racing with every step. Once outside, she grabbed her phone and called the police. The call that changed everything. "There is a human leg inside a meat shop," she said, her voice trembling. At first, the police operator thought it might be a prank, but the fear in her voice, the shortness of her breath, and the urgency in her words made it clear that something was terribly wrong. She described exactly what she had seen. Within minutes, the call was escalated to senior officers. Multiple police units were dispatched to the shopping mall. Sirens filled the streets as patrol cars rushed toward the location. Police arrival at the mall. When officers arrived, the mall was still operating as usual. Shoppers continued walking around, unaware that they were standing inside a crime scene. Police entered quietly, avoiding panic. They moved directly toward the meat shop. Two officers approached the glass display. They leaned in. For a moment, neither spoke. Then one officer whispered, "That's human." The entire shop was immediately sealed off. Security guards blocked the area. Customers were guided away. The store owner and staff were ordered to remain where they were. No one was allowed to leave. What police found inside. When officers opened the cold storage freezers, the situation turned far worse. Inside were more human body parts. Arms, thighs, chunks of flesh wrapped like ordinary meat packages. Some pieces were already cut into portions, ready for sale. Several officers struggled to control their reactions. One detective had to step outside after becoming physically sick. This was no longer just a suspicious incident. It was now confirmed as one of the most disturbing murder cases the city had ever seen. A missing girl. As investigators began processing the scene, one name immediately came to mind. A young woman who had gone missing just days earlier. Her name was Maria. She worked at a small hotel located inside the same shopping mall. Quiet, hardworking, barely in her early 20s. She supported her family and was known by co-workers as responsible and kind. One evening, after finishing her shift, she left the hotel. She never made it home. Her family reported her missing. Search efforts had turned up nothing. No witnesses, no surveillance leads, no signs of struggle, until now. The identification process. The body parts were rushed to forensic labs. DNA samples were taken. Dental records were checked. Hours later, confirmation arrived. The remains belonged to Maria. The moment this information became official, shockwaves spread across the city. The realization was unbearable. A young woman had been brutally murdered, dismembered, and then her body was being sold as meat in a public market. But the most terrifying question remained unanswered. Who did this, and why? A chilling suspect. Police turned their attention to the meat shop owner. Throughout the entire operation, he remained eerily calm. No panic, no visible fear, no confusion. His heartbeat was steady, his face emotionless. Officers later described his behavior as deeply disturbing. While surrounded by police and standing beside evidence of unspeakable crimes, he behaved as if nothing serious was happening. That chilling calmness raised immediate red flags, because no innocent man reacts like that. Before the horrifying discovery inside the meat shop, Maria was simply a young woman trying to survive. She was 22 years old. She lived with her mother and younger brother in a small apartment on the edge of the city. Her father had died years earlier, leaving the family struggling financially. Maria became the main support of the household. Every morning she woke before sunrise, took 2 crowded buses, and arrived at the shopping mall where she worked as a hotel attendant. Her life followed a strict routine: work, home, family, sleep. She had dreams of studying hospitality management one day, but for now, survival came first. Her co-workers described her as quiet, respectful, and focused. She avoided trouble. She kept to herself. She never stayed out late, which is why her disappearance shocked everyone. The last day anyone saw her, on a Wednesday evening, Maria finished her late shift at the hotel. Security cameras showed her clocking out at exactly 10:47 p.m. She changed into her regular clothes, placed her uniform inside her bag, and waved goodbye to the receptionist. It was her mother's birthday the next day, and Maria planned to stop by a bakery to buy a small cake before going home. That was the last confirmed sighting of her. Security cameras captured her walking out of the hotel entrance and turning toward the underground parking area. Then nothing. No footage of her leaving the mall. No footage of her entering a taxi. No footage of her boarding a bus. It was as if she had vanished inside the building. A growing panic. When Maria did not return home that night, her mother tried calling her phone. No answer. At first, she assumed Maria might be working overtime or had missed the bus. But as the hours passed, worry turned into fear. By morning, her phone was still unreachable. By afternoon, her family contacted the police. A missing persons report was filed. Officers questioned co-workers, friends, and hotel management. No one had seen or heard from her after she left work. Posters were printed. Her photo spread across social media. Local news stations ran her story. The city watched and waited, but no leads came forward. The man nobody noticed. As police reviewed the hotel staff list, one employee stood out. His name was Ricardo Alves. He worked as a night maintenance assistant at the hotel. Quiet, introverted, almost invisible. Co-workers barely remembered interacting with him. He often worked late hours, performing minor repairs and cleaning tasks after guests had gone to their rooms. Security logs showed that on the night Maria disappeared, Ricardo was still inside the building. His shift officially ended at 11:30 p.m., nearly 45 minutes after Maria left. At first, investigators did not focus on him. There was no immediate evidence linking him to the disappearance, but his presence would soon become critical. Strange activity on surveillance footage. As detectives examined security recordings more closely, they noticed something unusual. At 10:59 p.m., just 12 minutes after Maria walked out, a side service elevator activated. Inside the elevator camera, a figure could be seen pushing a large cleaning cart. The man's face was partially hidden by a cap. The cart looked heavier than usual. It moved slowly. Too slowly. That cart belonged to the hotel maintenance staff, and it matched the equipment assigned to Ricardo. The footage was grainy, but the timeline raised immediate suspicion. A pattern begins to emerge. Investigators traced Ricardo's movements over the following days. They reviewed his time logs, his transportation records, his phone activity. What they found was disturbing. On multiple nights, he remained inside the shopping mall long after his shift had officially ended, sometimes by 2 or 3 hours. Yet there were no maintenance tasks recorded during those periods. No repair reports, no cleaning logs, just extended presence. Why? What was he doing inside the building, alone, after midnight? The secret storage room. A breakthrough came when one of the security guards mentioned a locked service storage room located near the old service corridors, behind the food court. It was rarely used. Access required a special maintenance key. Only 3 employees had that key. One of them was Ricardo. Police obtained permission to open the room. When they entered, the smell hit them instantly. A strong metallic odor mixed with cleaning chemicals. Inside, they found industrial plastic sheets, heavy-duty knives, and deep stains that could not be fully removed. Blood. Forensic teams confirmed it within minutes. Large quantities of human blood had soaked into the floor. The room had been used recently. This was not an accident. This was a crime scene. Connecting the dots. Now the timeline began to make sense. Maria left her shift. She likely passed through a service corridor near the hotel. Ricardo, still inside the building, had access to restricted areas. He knew the layout. He knew which cameras worked and which did not. He knew which hallways stayed empty at night. Investigators believed he approached Maria under some pretext. A request for help, a maintenance question, or perhaps he simply followed her. What happened next would be revealed through evidence and later, through his own confession. The meat shop connection. One question still haunted detectives. How did human remains end up inside a meat shop? The answer lay in Ricardo's personal connections. Records showed that his uncle owned the butcher shop inside the same shopping mall. The two had a close relationship. Ricardo had free access to the shop's storage facilities. And most chilling of all, he had been trained in basic meat-cutting techniques. Techniques that matched the method used to dismember Maria's body. This was not random. This was planned. A city on edge. As news spread that a missing girl's remains had been found inside a public market, fear gripped the city. Parents stopped letting their children walk alone. Businesses closed early. Customers avoided the mall. People wondered how long such a monster had been operating unnoticed among them. And most terrifying of all, was Maria the first victim? Or just the one who got discovered? What police would soon learn. When Ricardo was brought in for questioning, his behavior stunned even veteran detectives. He showed no visible emotion. No fear, no guilt, no shock. But behind that calm face, investigators would soon uncover a mind filled with darkness and a confession that would leave the entire nation horrified. The interrogation room was cold, silent, and brightly lit. A single metal table stood in the center, surrounded by 3 chairs. One for the suspect, 2 for the detectives. A camera blinked quietly in the corner, recording every movement, every breath, every pause. At exactly 2:17 a.m., Ricardo Alves was escorted inside. His hands were cuffed behind his back, yet his expression remained calm, almost peaceful. He sat down slowly, looked around the room, and then fixed his eyes on the blank wall in front of him. No shaking, no nervous gestures, no visible fear. Detectives who had conducted hundreds of interrogations later said they had never seen anything like it. Most suspects arrived trembling, sweating, struggling to breathe. Ricardo appeared as if he were waiting for a routine meeting. The first questions. Detective Moreira, a seasoned investigator with 20 years of experience, began gently. Ricardo, we need to talk about Maria. Ricardo blinked once. No reaction. Where were you on the night she disappeared? A brief pause. Then, in a calm, flat tone, he replied, working. Until what time? 11:30? But security logs show you. Remained inside the building until almost 1 in the morning. Another pause. I stayed to clean. What were you cleaning? The service corridors. There were no cleaning requests. Silence. Ricardo lowered his eyes for a moment, then looked back up. I don't remember. The calmness in his voice sent a chill through the room. Evidence begins to stack up. Detectives placed photographs on the table. Security footage images. Bloodstained photos from the storage room. Images of the cleaning cart. Ricardo looked at them carefully. Not shocked. Not disturbed. Just curious. This cart belongs to you, Detective Moreira said. Ricardo nodded. Yes. And this room. You have access to it. Yes. Then how do you explain the blood? Ricardo stared at the photo for several seconds, then quietly said, I had an accident. What kind of accident? I cut myself. The detective slid another photo forward. A forensic report. The blood in that room belongs to Maria. That was the first moment something changed. Ricardo's lips tightened slightly, but only slightly. The breaking point. The interrogation continued for hours. Detectives confronted him with timeline reconstructions, witness statements, technical evidence, phone records. Every piece pointed toward one conclusion. Finally, at 5:46 a.m., after nearly 4 hours of questioning, Ricardo leaned back in his chair and exhaled slowly. I didn't plan to kill her, he said. The room went completely silent. Detective Moreira leaned forward. What happened, Ricardo? He stared at the table for a long moment, then began to speak. His version of that night. I saw her walking alone, Ricardo said quietly. She looked tired. I offered to walk her through the service corridor. It was safer. She trusted me. His voice remained calm, almost emotionless. She followed me. Inside the empty corridor, he claimed, he tried to talk to her. He said she rejected him, said she pushed him away, said she laughed. Then he said something inside him snapped. I grabbed her from behind, he continued. She screamed. I covered her mouth. She fought, but she was smaller. His words were cold, mechanical, as if describing a routine task. She stopped moving after a few minutes. The unthinkable aftermath. Instead of panicking, Ricardo said he felt calm, focused, methodical. He dragged her body into the storage room, locked the door, and began thinking, not about calling for help, not about hiding the crime, but about what to do next. He knew his uncle owned the butcher shop. He knew how meat was stored. He knew how meat was cut. I didn't want her to be found, he said. So I made her disappear. Dismemberment. The next part of his confession stunned even hardened investigators. Using industrial knives from the maintenance room, Ricardo dismembered Maria's body. Slowly, carefully, piece by piece. He wrapped the parts in plastic, cleaned the room, disposed of the blood-soaked materials, and transported the remains through service corridors using the cleaning cart, all while hundreds of people continued shopping just meters away. The building slept. The monster worked. The chilling motive. When detectives asked why he placed her remains inside the meat shop, his answer was even more disturbing. I wanted to see if anyone would notice. The room fell into complete silence. You wanted to test it? Detective Moreira asked. Yes, Ricardo replied. I wanted to see how blind people really are. That single sentence would later become one of the most quoted lines in the entire case. A mind without remorse. Throughout the confession, Ricardo showed no signs of guilt, no tears, no trembling, no emotional response. He described every detail with terrifying precision, even the position of her body, even the angle of the cuts, even the temperature inside the storage room. Psychologists later concluded that Ricardo displayed severe psychopathic traits. He lacked empathy, he lacked remorse, and most frightening of all, he felt no emotional connection to human suffering. The city learns the truth. When police officially released details of the confession, public reaction was explosive. Protests erupted outside police stations. Candlelight vigils were held for Maria. News channels ran continuous coverage. Parents held their children tighter. Shoppers avoided the mall entirely. People kept asking the same question. How could someone so ordinary-looking be capable of such horror? A dark possibility. As investigators reviewed Ricardo's past, unsettling patterns began to emerge. Missing person cases, unsolved assaults, unexplained disappearances, cases that suddenly seemed connected. The fear grew. Was Maria his first victim, or only the first one discovered? That answer would change everything. As dawn broke over the city, investigators knew one thing with absolute certainty. The horror did not end with Maria. Ricardo's confession opened a door that police had long feared to unlock. Because the calm way he described murder, the precision of his actions, and the absence of any emotion, all pointed toward a chilling possibility. Maria might not have been his first victim. Digging into his past, detectives immediately reopened several cold cases. Over the past 4 years, at least 6 young women had gone missing within a 30-kilometer radius of the shopping mall. Most were workers, cleaners, waitresses, hotel staff, women who followed strict routines, women who traveled alone, women who disappeared without witnesses. The patterns were impossible to ignore. Each case occurred late at night. Each woman was last seen near public buildings. Each investigation ended with no suspects. Until now, a trail of disturbing evidence. Police obtained warrants to search Ricardo's apartment. What they found inside stunned even the most hardened officers. Hidden beneath floorboards and inside. Sealed plastic containers were personal belongings. Hair clips, earrings, keychains, bracelets, small purses, items belonging to women who had vanished years earlier. Some of the objects were carefully labeled. Dates, locations, times, like trophies. The deeper police searched, the darker the discovery became. The storage unit. Records revealed that Ricardo rented a small storage unit outside the city. When investigators unlocked the rusted metal door, a cold, metallic smell drifted into the air. Inside were plastic barrels, sealed tightly, marked only with numbers. Forensic teams immediately recognized the danger. When the first barrel was opened, officers had to step back. Inside were human remains preserved using chemical solutions. More barrels followed. More remains. More victims. By the end of the operation, investigators confirmed at least 4 additional bodies. Each belonged to a woman previously listed as missing. A monster revealed. The evidence was undeniable. Ricardo was not a man who lost control once. He was a serial killer, a predator who had carefully chosen victims, planned his attacks, covered his tracks, and lived an ordinary life in between. Neighbors described him as polite. Co-workers called him quiet. Shopkeepers remembered him as respectful. No one suspected the darkness hiding behind his calm face. Public outrage. As details flooded the media, public reaction turned explosive. Crowds gathered outside police headquarters. Protesters demanded justice. Families of missing women held photographs and wept openly. News channels broadcast nonstop coverage. Parents feared for their daughters. Workers refused late-night shifts. The city was gripped by fear. People wanted answers. They wanted accountability. And above all, they wanted Ricardo punished. The trial begins. Months later, the courtroom overflowed. Journalists from across the country filled every seat. Security presence was heavy. Outside, crowds waited in silence. Inside, Maria's family sat in the front row. Her mother clutched a framed photograph of her daughter. Ricardo entered wearing prison clothes. Hands cuffed, face blank. He did not look toward the families. He did not show regret. He did not lower his eyes. He simply sat, waiting. The prosecution's case. Prosecutors laid out overwhelming evidence. Security footage, DNA reports, blood analysis, confession transcripts, physical items recovered from his apartment and storage unit. Experts explained how each victim had been targeted. Psychologists testified about his personality. Forensic specialists described the methodical nature of the killings. Every detail pointed toward a single horrifying truth. Ricardo had killed multiple women, and he had enjoyed the power. The defense argument. Ricardo's lawyers attempted to claim mental illness. They argued diminished responsibility. They tried to portray him as psychologically unstable, but medical evaluations contradicted them. Multiple experts concluded that Ricardo was fully aware of his actions. He understood right and wrong. He knew exactly what he was doing. And he did it anyway. Maria's mother speaks. At one point, the judge allowed Maria's mother to address the court. She stood slowly, trembling. Her voice cracked as she spoke. My daughter was kind. She worked hard. She trusted people. She looked directly at Ricardo. You took her life and turned her into nothing but pieces of meat. The courtroom fell into complete silence. Tears streamed down faces. Even seasoned journalists struggled to write. Ricardo did not react. Not even then. The verdict. After weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated for 11 hours. The entire nation waited. Finally, the verdict was announced. Guilty on all counts. Multiple counts of first-degree murder, kidnapping, desecration of human remains, obstruction of justice. Ricardo was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. As the sentence was read, families embraced. Some cried. Some screamed. Some collapsed in relief. But the emptiness left behind could never be filled. A city forever changed. The shopping mall closed for renovations. Security procedures were rewritten across the region. Hotels implemented new safety measures. Late-night work policies were changed. But no policy could erase the memory. The horror of knowing that such evil had lived among them, that death had walked their hallways, that a monster had worked beside them. One question remained. Even after conviction, one chilling question lingered. How many victims were never found? How many families still waited for answers? And how many secrets did Ricardo take with him into prison? Because despite his confession, investigators believed he still hid parts of the truth. When the courtroom doors finally closed, many believed the nightmare was over. The killer was behind bars. The truth had been exposed. Justice, at least in legal terms, had been served. But for the families of the victims, the pain was only beginning. Because closure does not come with a verdict. It comes with answers. and some answers were never found. Life behind bars. Ricardo was transferred to a high-security prison on the outskirts of the country. His cell was small. Concrete walls, steel bars, a narrow bed, a single window too high to see through. He would spend the rest of his life there. Yet even in isolation, he remained disturbingly calm. Prison guards later described him as quiet and cooperative. He followed rules. He avoided conflict. He rarely spoke, and when he did, his words were slow and carefully chosen. He showed no visible remorse, no grief, no emotional reaction to the lives he had destroyed. Psychologists continued to evaluate him for years. Their conclusion remained the same. Ricardo possessed a deeply rooted psychopathic personality. He understood suffering. He simply did not care. The families left behind. For Maria's mother, every morning felt heavier than the last. She still woke at the same hour her daughter used to, still prepared breakfast for two, still caught herself listening for footsteps that would never return. Maria's room remained untouched. Her clothes hung in the closet. Her shoes stood neatly by the door. Her photo sat on the bedside table. A frozen moment of a life stolen too soon. For the families of the other victims, the pain was just as unbearable. Some had waited years for answers. Years of unanswered phone calls. Years of empty birthdays. Years of hope slowly turning into despair. Now they had a name, a face, a confession. But nothing could give them back what they had lost. Unanswered questions. Despite Ricardo's detailed confession, investigators believed he was still hiding information. Several missing person cases remained unresolved. Some personal belongings found in his apartment did not match any known victims. Some DNA fragments could not be identified. And in his storage unit, certain barrels had been removed long before police discovered the location. Where had they gone? What had been inside them? Ricardo refused to answer. During later interviews, he would only say, "Not everything needs to be known." That sentence haunted investigators, because it suggested that even greater horrors might remain buried forever. The psychological puzzle. Criminal psychologists studied Ricardo's case extensively. They analyzed his childhood, his family background, his school records, his social behavior, yet nothing clearly explained how such darkness had formed. He was not abused. He was not neglected. He did not grow up in poverty. He did not experience extreme trauma. By all accounts, his childhood was normal, which made his crimes even more terrifying, because it suggested that evil does not always grow from pain. Sometimes it simply exists, hidden, waiting. How he was never caught sooner. One of the most disturbing lessons from this case was how easily Ricardo avoided detection. He did not act suspiciously. He did not display violent behavior in public. He did not draw attention. He blended in. He worked. He smiled politely. He followed routines. He became invisible. Experts later explained that many serial predators survive precisely because they appear ordinary. They learn to copy normal behavior. They study social rules. They mimic emotions they do not truly feel. They become actors in everyday life, and that makes them almost impossible to identify. A city that would never forget. Years later, the shopping mall reopened, renovated, repainted, modernized. New stores replaced the old ones. New workers filled the halls. New families walked the shiny floors. But some locals still avoided the place. They said the walls felt heavy, that the silence carried memories, that certain corners seemed darker than others. No matter how much time passed, the shadow of what happened there never fully disappeared. Maria's legacy. In memory of Maria and the other victims, local organizations created safety programs for night workers. Security measures were strengthened. Emergency response systems were upgraded. Self-defense training became more accessible. Awareness campaigns were launched. Maria's story became a symbol, not just of tragedy, but of the urgent need to protect the vulnerable. Her name would not be forgotten. The final truth. In the end, this case revealed something deeply unsettling, that monsters do not always hide in dark alleys. They do not always wear threatening faces. Sometimes they wear uniforms. Sometimes they work beside us. Sometimes they walk past us in shopping malls. And sometimes they sell meat. A warning to the world. This story is not just about horror. It is a reminder to stay aware, to trust your instincts, to question what feels wrong, to speak up, even when fear tries to silence you. Because in this case, one woman's courage, one careful glance, and one phone call exposed a nightmare and saved unknown lives. Final words. They found a human leg in a meat shop. What police discovered next was horrifying. But what this case ultimately teaches us is that evil survives in silence, and truth begins with attention.